Okay, we have Dave Lurie from GE who will be moderating this session, along with Brianna Gays from Hulu, Carolina Valencia from Univision, and Jeremy Goldman from Firebrand Group. So if we could give them a warm welcome, that would be great. Thank you.
All right, I realize that we're the last session. We're standing between you and the bar. It's always a good place to be. And I realize maybe some of the empty seats have something to do with the ridiculous name of this panel. I take full responsibility. So I'm Dave Lurie. I work at GE in the Media Innovation Group. Started my career in communications, really focused on issues management and financial communications. About a year ago, I saw a real opportunity in the intersecting worlds of media and communications, and took a role on the brand marketing team. So really excited to kick it off with this panel. I think in a time where these disciplines are converging, there's no better time to have this sort of discussion, and we have a great panel here to do it. I think as you look at the intersections of these disciplines, you'll start to see the seeds of the future of our profession. And it's really quite exciting. So if we could just go down the line, Brianna, with you, just talk a little bit about your background, what you do, and yeah, that should be it.
Well, thanks for coming, guys. How many people in the room Googled PESO before you came in? Anybody? Show your hands? No, just kidding. All good, David. I love the headline. I'm Brianna. I'm with Hulu's communications team here in New York. And I focus specifically on our advertising business, our ad tech business, and most recently, a little bit of our MarTech initiatives. My background is very unique. Studied broadcast journalism, worked at ABC, was a writer, decided I wanted to be a producer, worked with guests, and then found my way to the other side, also known as public relations. Spent some time working in ad tech, a challenge, but very interesting, and here I am with Hulu. So excited to be here with you all before the bar.
Hi, thank you all for being here. I'm Carolina Valencia. I work at Univision, which we're primarily known for the Spanish language network, but we actually have a pretty big portfolio of networks and digital platforms, even The Onion. I do communications and social media. I've done influencer marketing. And before my time at Univision, I worked at the New York Times on many different levels. So thank you all for being here, and I'm excited for this panel.
My name is Jeremy Goldman. I am the founder and CEO of Firebrand Group, which is a creative consultancy that uses data to develop predictions about the future and then help companies get there before their competitors do. So it's really interesting to me, obviously, being here, part of this convergence panel, because I've been told that I'm in advertising, I've been told I'm in communications, I've been told I'm in research. There are all these things that are converging right now, and I don't really care about the labels. I just care about taking the organizations that we represent to the next level. So great to be here.
Cool. So I'll start with an easy first question, and maybe an existential one. PESO has been around for a long while. It's sort of been used to represent what good integrated media should look like. Is it still useful? Is the way we think about our marketing mix delineated in these ways a useful way to think about a successful integrated approach, or is it outdated? Or should it be something different? Brianna?
I would actually say that it's not outdated, and it seems so simple. Paid, earned, social, and owned. It's foundational, especially at this time where earn looks like paid, and paid looks like earned, and marketing looks like communications, and communications looks like marketing. We are at an inflection point that demands something simple that we can all kind of group around, and really PESO is a good example of that. It's a foundation that we can use in all of our different campaigns and all of our different strategies. So I'm a fan of PESO.
I would add, agreed. I think it's also evolving. there isn't a clear lane anymore, and the bottom line is who's your audience and what is the goal, because not everything is going to be earned and not everything is going to be paid. It depends on where your campaign is, and you may start with earned, but the messaging and the narrative need to be aligned and figure out which channel it is that you're going to use. It may be all, it may be just one, it may be just a few. So you also have to think about your audience and who you're trying to target, because there may be even experiential or influencer marketing, right? So there's all these other pieces that we need to think now, because there's so much of that content proliferation, even with media and journalists, that you need to think about what is that connection and engagement that's going to make you stand out with your overall narrative.
I think that's a really good point, and I think that, building on that, if you look at the way that different organizations are built, each organization has a particular axis that it's tilting towards, and a lot of that happens to be, where does the leadership come from, right? Do you have somebody who's leading the organization who comes from an ad sales background or comes from a logistics background, like even going beyond PESO? A lot of that, has something to do with what gets funded and what gets more time in management meetings, and that tends to just really tilt the overall way that an organization is going to be running itself.
Yeah, Jeremy, you get into a good point around organization and culture. Caroline, I'm interested at Univision. How are you structured to maximize sort of this integrated world? Is it under a CMO that's very hierarchical? Are there more empowered teams? Are there specialists or more generalists? I'm curious about that.
At Univision, I think, and I'm here, biased because, I've been at the company for a long time and I'm a fan of the leadership, but they're all very digitally minded. So when they're thinking about a campaign or an initiative, if we're going to stand up for DACA, or if we're going to talk about how successful our ratings are, or if we're going to talk about something we've launched or something we've acquired, we generally tend to create task force, right? Because it doesn't live in one lane, and we want to make sure that if there is something that we need to signal to the marketplace, whether it's the advertising marketers audience, or it's our own consumers, or both, that there's clear strategies and tactics in place. So you usually have, like right now, we as a company that's mission driven, we've set up a task force to talk about and see how, from a corporate advocacy standpoint, we're gonna get our message out about why this is important from a business standpoint, right? There's separate, obviously, there's the news side of the editorial that we're gonna cover, but there's different people involved from a local standpoint, from a digital standpoint, from an editorial standpoint, from a government relations standpoint, and communication sits in all of these in marketing. So we make sure as much as possible we drive it that way, because it doesn't live in one place. And more than ever, because of the content proliferation, we need to make sure that we're, touching different touch points.
What about at Hulu? How are you guys structured?
I think we have a lot of independent specialists. We have integrated marketing. We have a marketing team that focuses really on that subscriber acquisition. We have a PR team that sits separate from our CMO. But while we have all of these different strategic groups, we really do go back to this whole idea of a task force. And I think that's embedded in the PESO structure. It forces all of our organizations to come together to bring in the experts per channel to have these discussions, to think about these things holistically. When our marketing team is going out with a new content strategy, our integrated marketing team, who is focused on a B2B trade strategy, is in the loop thinking about how can we jump onto this, how can we support this so that Hulu as a brand is doing everything in a holistic manner. It's a kind of a unique approach, but it's kind of what PESO stands for, and bringing these task force together.
Interesting. Jeremy, I got a question for you. I guess we'll suppose you're our token agency guy, which is really nice, but...
Love being a token.
Talk to me a little bit about as you think about these task force, these multidisciplinary task force, what are the strengths of having someone in that coalition with an earned media background? What are some of the natural biases of someone that has that sort of lens on? And maybe what are some of the weaknesses or blind spots?
Yeah, I think that one of the key things, and I love that you pointed this out, is that what are the biases, right? And same thing that you even pointed that out. That's an important thing for each and every one of us as we're putting together a team like that to be aware of, where somebody who is part of a task force and who brings a certain point of view to the table, it doesn't mean that it's right or wrong if there's a bias involved, but it does mean that we all have to acknowledge it, and that we don't, it's important that we don't overweight something just because it comes from somebody who says, I really think that earned is going to be imperative to this campaign, and meanwhile that's how they built out their whole entire career, you know? So it's important to kind of factor that in, take that with a grain of salt. Likewise, by the way, the same thing goes to say that if the CEO is part of a meeting like that and they weigh in with an idea, it doesn't mean that it's a better idea just because they're paid more than you, right? So that's something that actually has to be acknowledged as well. So the key thing is to have essentially a balanced scorecard approach in terms of weighing ideas and weighing the tactics that you're going to incorporate in terms of making this a successful campaign.
I just want to add to that. I think you need to be as informed as possible about what your peers do, because while they own these different things and they are experts in their fields, you should be informed to be able to advise if it makes sense. Like, I was in a meeting today and they're like, you know, we should get our creators to do these things. And, you know, it was from a very senior leader. It wasn't the right forum, but this is where you have to make sure that you engage with the teams. Like, this is not actually the best thing for a creator because this is not how they like to engage, right? But nobody will be able to do that if you don't have the expertise or are not informed enough to be able to provide that guidance. So as much as possible, like I would say, over-prepare and be as informed as possible with what your peers do, because we need to make sure that holistically the strategy makes sense and that you're not, whatever channel you're approaching, that it doesn't make the campaign or the effort or the initiative, you know, look like it doesn't make sense, or that you're tone deaf because somebody had an idea and they were a very senior leader, and that means that you have to do it.
Brianna, anything we can learn from our colleagues that focus on advertising specifically or social specifically that we could bring into the public relations discipline?
Absolutely. I mean, there's so many things that I learn every single day from my sales team. How to be a better seller, how to pitch better. Just kidding. I don't follow those rules. But when it's partnering with our team that focuses on paid media, they take a unique approach. Obviously, they're looking at all of the different channels. But I don't know if it's necessarily learning from them, but rather asking the questions of why are you doing these things? They have the expert's dilemma, and I think we run into that every single day, internally and externally. So it's asking the questions of why and where and how to educate ourselves, and then to be able to say, earned is really important. Earned is foundational to what I do. How can I either support your initiative with earned or maybe tack it on? And that's just sort of my perspective and from a PR standpoint, but really being okay asking the questions to educate yourselves and figure out where maybe earned placement might fit best.
Can you talk a little bit more about the expert's dilemma? And then Jeremy, hop in.
Yeah, so from an expert's dilemma, in what way, per se?
Just for folks in the room, I guess, what do you mean by that?
Expert's dilemma. We are all experts at something, and we assume that our counterparts understand what we do every day and the value that brings to the company. Expert's dilemma, perfect example. I work with integrated marketing, and integrated marketing works on trade campaigns, B2B strategy. I have no idea often what they're saying. They're using words that are inherent in someone with a marketing background. They're just speaking to me. So it's being confident as a PR, as a communications representative, and just saying, hey, hang on, that's not my expertise. Can you walk me through why and what this is and how it brings value to your campaign or the campaign we're working on? Naturally, we all have an expertise, and we forget that the other people in the room maybe don't. Kind of going over everyone's heads.
You see, yeah.
Oh yeah, I was just going to say, and something to riff off of what you were pointing out is to look at these different departments and disciplines and to see that there's sometimes an impact that you're not necessarily, like the law of unintended consequences. So perfect example is you often have, like, let's say an ad sales unit that might be selling something that can have a positive or negative impact on another discipline such as social. So for instance, on Twitter, this has happened a few times, so I don't have to cite even one source, but if you have a promoted hashtag, and which is obviously an ad sale to be made, but then to also be thinking about, well, does the social team necessarily know about the fact that this is going to happen so that they can respond to it? And more than one time, a brand has been caught flat-footed where they didn't know that something was happening that was going to very clearly, directly affect their day, so that they would be in crisis communications mode over the next day. And that's why these, we're talking about pretty advanced organizations here, but there are a lot of organizations where one hand is not, talking to the other, and I mean, there's a lot of anecdotal evidence to support that that is far from a best practice.
Cool. I want to start moving the conversation. I know we have about 20 minutes left. I want to leave some room for questions and something more tactical that you guys can bring home. So I want to start off with a fun question, which is, who are you guys crushing on right now? A brand, a figure, political figure, an athlete, from an integrated marketing communications perspective. Brianna?
Okay, I have a huge crush on Spotify, huge crush, and that's not because we just launched the $5.99 deal. I'm not promoting Hulu at all. Last March, they launched their integrated marketing team, launched a outdoor billboard campaign, the playlist campaign. I don't know if anyone saw that here. But to the guy that played I'm Sorry 42 times on Valentine's Day, I don't know what you did either. But that was a sensation for me, only in that what it did from an earned and from a social standpoint. It was a really good example of how your marketing team can create something that becomes something for your PR team or for your social community. That was huge. If I could replicate that on Hulu, I would.
They did a great job for Hispanic Heritage Month too. They had you do a filter where the country where you're from. So I did my made in Ecuador. It was pretty cool. So I agree. I'm a huge baseball fan, and I think the way that this country has evolved tremendously. It's great to see brands or even personalities embrace that. And we're in the postseason. I'm a Yankee fan, so sorry for those that are not. But MLB launched a Spanish language account, and I think they're doing a phenomenal job to represent that amazing talent that's rising, that really has resonated with our audience, that represents the U.S. today. So I would say MLB Mayores, and then one more from a personal standpoint. It's a creator. His name is Rudy Mancuso, and I've known him since he was he was doing comedy skits, and now he's actually releasing his single and music and all that. So it's been really great to follow his evolution.
So it's a little bit of a cheat, but it's, I would say, rather than a brand specifically, one of the key things that I have a crush on right now is anybody who's trying out a new particular ad unit, and it doesn't necessarily matter what type of ad unit it is, but to people who are building integrated campaigns around them. And I'll give you an example, kind of like where Facebook Canvas was, but a year ago, there are a number of different companies where the moment something is in beta, they will jump at the chance to do something, and then they won't just throw some money at it, but it'll also be, well, how do we support this with social? How do we do something interesting enough so that we're going to get some, PR around it, and PR in a meaningful way, not we did a stunt that's not going to actually deliver any type of demonstrable value to the brand long term, but something that's actually tied in with the brand mission. So it's really a core idea of exploring what's new and tapping the potentially high ROI that you get out of that before everybody else does. And that's the thing I'm kind of crushing on right now.
That's awesome. So one thing for you guys, can you share one quick tactic, either something you did internally or something that you saw in the external world that you were a big fan of, that the professionals in the room could turn around and bring to their advertising team or their social team and do tomorrow, that really combines the world of earned and social and owned and paid? Any quick tactical things that you're a big fan of right now?
I don't know if necessarily like a quick little thing, maybe it's more from a strategy standpoint, but the companies out there, or the organizations, agencies out there that aren't getting distracted by FOMO, so they create a strategy and they stick to it from the beginning. That is their strategy, and they're thinking long term. And you can really see them reaping the rewards and building the relationship with their audiences when they do. It's the little things that jump out. Okay, maybe there's this paid opportunity or there's this event that distract you from your long-term goal. So really knowing what FOMO is, identifying it, and saying, I'm not going down that road.
Cool. Carolina?
I think I agree with Brianna. I think you have to just keep in mind your strategy and your goals, so you're not like distracted by, oh my God, let me jump on that. Everybody's doing it. You need to be very clear about where your organization stands. But you also need to keep with the times, right? So like for us PR professionals, it's not about a press release anymore. Everybody's like, oh, let's do a press release on this. I'm like, or we hit this milestone, and okay, great, that's for the company, but you need to see where things stand in the industry to see if it's a story that's worth it for a reporter. But we also need to keep in mind, like for us, it's been being very mindful about how journalists are engaging, so that we're not sending them press releases. You know, it continues to be some of the traditional things about connecting with them, but also it's like, hey, this may not be a press release, but we need to get this out quickly. Let's put it out on Instagram and Twitter. Let's do a few stories, and think about them just like a consumer. So that's been something that we've been really pushing to get away from this, give me a press release.
Very cool.
Yeah, I would say actually looking, it's not necessarily a tactic, but looking to see what doesn't fit within the paradigm of yesterday or today, and trying to figure out what is, outside the box that you're able to implement that's going to make sense for your organization. So it doesn't mean, like we're saying here, take whatever's new and just, throw it in and say, yeah, we're gonna do this too, without necessarily thinking about whether or not it's meaningful for your organization. Think obviously about the core KPIs of the organization as a whole, as well as your department, and then investigate everything new and say, is this going to help me achieve my objectives faster than ever before? We just put out a paper on the future of location and proximity-based technologies. Why? Because it's something that we saw that a lot of people are getting a high return on, and yet a lot of people are still not paying any attention to, because it doesn't fit under the previous paradigm of, like, where does it live, and is it paid, or is it social, and right? So because of that fascinated us, and that's why we dove into that, because we wanted to know more about that ourselves.
Yeah, you bring up a big topic that comes up as we start to think about how these teams can work better together, which is measurement. So a simple question: what are best practices, or what's advice that you have for communicators looking to come up with good universal metrics to work with their colleagues towards? Are there any good practices or advice that you have for practitioners?
Well, I would. Okay, there's a lot there, but I mean, I think because frankly, it's we're tasked with showing like the numbers show that something worked, and then people after the fact start to try to justify their jobs or their contract or whatever. More importantly, it's critical for people to put together what their KPIs are at the beginning of a project, and to say, this will be successful if we achieve this. If we achieve this, then it wasn't successful, and what can we learn from it? And that's okay. So to put the measurement metrics in place at the beginning, and then I think this is a problem in the world of, big data, hate that term. There's way too much right now of saying, because we can collect everything, let's just spend equal amounts of time, looking at every single thing that we collect. I'd rather collect 7 things and block everything out other than that, and just focus on those religiously. That's what the really successful organizations do, is they don't pride themselves on tracking 149 things and call those KPIs, because the K stands for key, and if you've got 149, then you're not focused on the key.
Brianna, any North Star metrics at Hulu that your team works towards?
Hulu's been around what? We've been around not even 10 years. So for us, one of the big North Stars is share of voice. We're in a rapidly changing ecosystem. We've diversified our business. We are the only streaming service out there with advertising. So there are all these complications to what and who we are, but we just keep going back to share of voice. I mean, that's just really important for us right now.
Very cool. Carolina?
I would just add, because I think for earned media, it's, some would say it's tricky to show the value of it, and I think it goes back to the goal. Were we looking to get an exclusive? Is that how we're gonna drive the narrative? So thinking about that, but also thinking about everything that comes with that story, right? The journalist, how much that story was amplified, whether by the media or the journalists themselves, and by us, right? Because it's an opportunity for us to even extend that reach. And I think that the opposite of that is we need to get away from impressions, this notion of impressions. It's not a real number. You're assuming people saw the story or read the story or interacted with the story at some point. I think we need to focus more on the actual value of the story and who actually shared it and liked it and actually read it versus just a number because of the publication's reach.
Are there other better metrics other than impressions that you guys have seen that you're like grappling with or starting to use? Are they perceptual metrics? Are share-based metrics typically what organizations are looking for? Any insight there?
Yeah, so there's actually a number of different metrics that are essentially proxy measures that you can, and a lot of smart organizations are starting to do more in terms of saying, okay, well, if we can't have impressions as the thing that we're really paying attention to, what should we be paying attention to, right? And part of the way to do that is to run sample experiments where you're running ads in one market and not in another, and looking to see what's, like, we're talking about attribution at the end of the day, right? So if I want somebody to take an action, such as to subscribe or to purchase something, right? What are the actions that we're taking? What are the stories that are being placed in which pubs that are actually moving the needle and leading to increased conversions, right? And I think that the attribution aspect of it is so much more important. It's not, I don't want to know that something happened. I want to know that something happened because of the thing that happened.
Very cool. So I'm going to open up to questions in just 1 minute, so get your questions ready. I just have one final question for the group, which is, as you look at the landscape today, we've all had different career journeys and picked up different skills along the way. What would you go back to school for and learn, if you could take a year off, or if you could go back in time, what do you wish you studied?
Everything. No, I'd say computer science only because that's the one area that, as much as I try, I can't. Just no words. I'll go back to school, I swear.
I would want to be a coder, know how to hack things. I'm just fascinated with that, so.
Ooh, that's a really good, I think probably I would have to go for psychology, because you guys are really fascinating, and I don't understand what consumers do, even though I've been doing this for so long. So I think that there's still more work to be done.
Cool. Thanks, guys. We'll open it up. First question. Cool.
Yeah. Okay, so Amelia, brand strategist for State Farm. And so I live this world of PESO. It's an integrated communication strategy. We do it a lot. And I think my biggest challenge, because we're in the communications side of this house, is the money. Marketing has all the money. But we all know as communicators that you can have a paid and earned strategy coming from your communications. Distribute your stories. Like if you have a great story on Univision or on The Root or Onion, pay to distribute it. Social, who owns it, who's paying for it. And so that's a really hard challenge, is to show that communications or the PR function needs the money just as much as the marketing. Now, obviously, some of the paid is usually digital paid or advertising. That's not the money I'm talking about. It's the nuanced. So any thoughts or where you guys are at your shops?
So from the Univision standpoint, we love our marketing team. We partner with our marketing team. Hi, we're thinking about this. We're going to place a story. I think this would be great for the audience. Can we put some paid behind it? Or if there's a campaign we're working on, we want to do this really great PR event, because again, we don't get all the funds. We do the earned media, that's free. So we work very closely with our marketing team, which includes, the events team, the paid team, the digital teams, and even the experiential team. So I think that partnership is key, because it allows you to combine, actually do better storytelling for the, if it's something that the advertising team needs for us to signal, if it's something our distribution team needs for us to signal, we work very closely with our marketing team. So I would, sweeten that up.
Yeah, if you can get compromising photos of the marketing team, or ideally even the CFO, that's definitely what we consider to be best practice. But other than that, just building on your idea, really, if you can give somebody the idea, make them think it's their idea, and you can know it's your idea. The negative thing is that you're not going to get funded any better next year unless you actually find a way to let everybody know that it's your idea. But if you believe that something's right for the organization, then throw it in front of them, and then let them essentially, Seth Godin says, pee on the idea, make it their own, and then it'll often get funded.
I think in this example, you probably face this sort of siloed thinking where PR is over here, but yet, we'll work together when it makes sense. One of the things that I have found to be effective is thinking about what is really valuable to that CMO and what are some of the campaigns that they have running, and figuring out a way to kind of like undermine and fit in. And here is an example of how great this event is for you, to kind of, sweeten the deal, so to speak. That has worked for me in the past, but, it's certainly a challenge when there are silos, absolutely.
Any other questions? Okay. Thanks, everyone. We'll see you at the bar.